let's welcome our next storyteller to the stage. Excited about this. Dr. Joeseph Sobol.
Thank you. One of my favorite Appalachian wonder tales has a father who says to his daughter, "I'm going to town to sell my goods. I'd like to bring you something for a present. What will it be?" And the first one says, "I'd like a bolt of cloth to make a dress the color of all the leaves in the forest when they first turn in the fall." And the second one says, "I'd like a bolt of cloth to make a dress the color of all the leaves in the forest when they first come out in the spring." And you think about that, and there are even more shades of green than there are shades of the turning leaves. So here's another. At the end of the summer of our bicentennial year, 1976, I took the Green Tortoise bus, the rolling hippie crash pad version of Greyhound, from New York City to San Francisco to start my new life as a college graduate. Now, I hadn't intended even to be in this country during the bicentennial year. I was taking my senior year abroad in England, and I intended to spend the summer as far away from possible from the platoons of dancing Elvises. I was going to be in France, the old country, the cathedral country, and I was going to spend the summer going from cathedral town to cathedral town, drinking from demi-liters of Van Ordinaire in sidewalk cafes on the cathedral squares, and breathing in the air of old Europe, and gradually washing away the taint of my callow suburban boyhood. I meant to just live this out. I was going to play the role of someone whose soul was older than the Gothic stones, and if I played it well enough and hard enough and long enough, I was sure that it was going to sink into my marrow bones and become true. But sure enough, I got a letter from America, from Mom and Dad, saying, "Come home, son. Dad's got a new job in California." And Mom's working on her long-delayed dissertation under a deadline, typing 3 copies with carbon paper. Remember that? And they needed me to come home and help pack up the house. So I skipped Amiens and Beauvais and Saint-Denis and Sainte-Chapelle and came home to the town of Rye for a miserable couple of months packing boxes. I started to hate that house, that little tract home in the suburbs, not because it wasn't beautiful and green, but because it had captured so much of my memory and my affections, and now it was going to leave me, and I was going to leave it. And I didn't want to hand it over lock, stock, and barrel to another couple of commuters and their little dewy offspring. I wanted it gone. I wanted to obliterate it. I wanted to erase it from the face of the earth. I was not an arsonist by nature. But when I heard that Hurricane Bell, the first great hope of the hurricane season, was roaring up the East Coast, ready to turn Long Island Sound into a frothing, seething beast of prey, I was ready for it. I said, "Bring it on! Come on, Belle! Come and get me!" I wanted to feel her surge up Betsy Brown Road, pick up my house, me, my mother, her typewriter, that damn carbon paper, and wash us all out to sea, which was really the only future I could imagine for myself at that point. So I went to bed, and the wind was already howling around my corner bedroom. The rain was splattering on the roof. This was hopeful. I woke up at 3 in the morning, and the wind was now, it had risen to a dead roar. I pressed my face to the glass, and I saw the trees lashing back and forth in the wind, their canopies blowing. There was debris flying around the house. The whole thing was lit up in an endless flicker of green sheet lightning. I half expected to see the wicked witch of the West go by on her broomstick. "Ha ha ha, my pretty!" I thought, this is good. I'm doomed. And I fell back to bed, closed my eyes, and waited for the end. When I opened them, sunshine was streaming in the windows, and my mother was at the top of the stairs sucking wind. Ooh! Ooh! The cedar tree! Sure enough, the tall, straight red cedar tree that marked the boundary of our property and the Serlins' yard had fallen in the storm and spread itself all across our backyard like a beached whale. It was sitting on its branches, and there was a great big crater in the earth where its roots had come out, and that crater, the negative, or the positive imprint of that crater was hanging in midair at the end of that horizontal trunk. It was really impressive. And as I walked around that thing, my heart began to lift. I felt better and better as the workmen came and sawed it up into big rounds and rolled it away. I felt like that cedar tree had died for me. And I felt steadily better until it was time to pick up the last few possessions and take them down to New York City and get on the Green Tortoise. Well, the Green Tortoise was a recycled late 50s Trailways Silver Eagle that had been repainted green with yellow psychedelic swirls along the sides and great big cartoon turtle eyes on the headlights. The inside had been gutted, the seats taken out, and the whole thing padded in green shag carpeting, floor to ceiling. The wheel wells had been hollowed out into sleeping, kind of submarine sleeping compartments that could fit 5 or 6 sleeping bags abreast. And as I stood waiting online, to get on board, it was like a cross section of mid-70s counterculture in its decline. There were grizzled stoner sages in buckskins with Old Testament beards, all the way down to fresh-faced college students sporting their first crop of over-the-ear hair and sideburns. And there were some single mothers toting youngsters, at large in America, maybe for the first time without shame or stigma. And then there was Alan and Maria. They were hard to miss. Alan was tall, lanky, with seraphic blonde ringlets pointing horizontally out. Long, full-length black cape with a red velvet lining. Expression of cultivated decadence. And his partner, Maria, who was tiny, pencil-thin, blonde, but with kind of Morticia Adams highlights. Kohl-rimmed eyes, black cocktail sheath dress with no evidence of undergarments. Elbow-length, mesh gloves, blackened skin. She was turned out. And we all got on the Green Tortoise bus, and we rolled down the streets of New York City to the Lincoln Tunnel, down under the Hudson, up into Jersey, hit Route 80, and stayed on for the rest of the way. Let us be lovers, we'll marry our fortunes together. Well, as you do in one of these intense short-term deployments, you start telling personal stories, like we're doing tonight, and turning yourselves from strangers into friends. Maria noticed my notebook, in which I was scribbling at every opportunity, and she asked if I was a writer. I said I was. And I'm moving to San Francisco to stand on the trembling edge of the continent and feel the earth changes through the soles of my feet. She said, good. I'm a writer too. And Alan, he's an actor and a magician. A stage magician, but also something else that she called a ceremonial magician. It had something to do with someone I'd never heard of named Aleister Crowley, who I didn't think came from the suburbs. Maria was a lesbian and a practicing sadist. And Alan was gay and a masochist, so they were a perfect couple. Maria said, we still have sex together, but it's mostly just to torment each other. I said, well, I didn't have many stories like that, but I was really happy to meet people like themselves who had thrown off the shackles of convention and were busy inventing life as they lived it. And Maria said, oh, you have stories. You just can't be ashamed to tell them. And Alan added rather helpfully, you can't be ashamed of anything. And so, by way of demonstration, At night, in the wheel-well sleeping tanks, as the wheels rolled across the great American continent, transmitting a vibration like magic fingers into our sleeping bags, Maria and Alan would torment each other, and the rest of us as well, by having loud, sadomasochistic sex there in their sleeping bags. She would slap him across the face and call him bitch, 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 and he would lie there in quiet contentment. As I lay next to them there, it was all I could do to restrain myself from reaching for that notebook and taking notes. But I felt that might be rude. So I took mental notes, waited till later when I could write this out at my leisure. I was happy to be having this experience, though, because now I had some stories to tell at some future event that I could not foresee. In the daytime, the kids on the bus would whine and cry out of sheer boredom, and they were crossing the great flat midsection of America, and Alan would distract them. He was a magician, after all. He would pick quarters out of their long, matted, hippie kid hair. And then the kids would whine and cry until Alan gave them the quarters. And this was getting expensive, prohibitively expensive. Before we were even out of Ohio, Alan was tearing out his hair. And finally, somewhere north of Denver, he changed tactics. He suddenly said, he pointed out the starboard side window, and he said, "Look, a flying saucer!" And all the kids went running to the window. Where? He said, "Ah, it's gone." "Look, there it is again." And they all went to the other side of the bus, and they looked out. Where? Oh, you're too late. There's nobody can see a flying saucer if they haven't seen it first. The kids said, "What do we do?" He said, "We'll have to put you on watch detail. We'll need 2 kids at all time, one watching out one side, one out watching out the other, and that way at least someone will see it first." And of course, all the kids that weren't on watch were still on watch because they all wanted to see it first. So we passed the rest of the trip in relative comfort, completely free of boredom, and sure enough, our green tortoise was never hit by the dreaded alien death ray. Well, as we were rolling across the central plains of California on our approach to San Francisco, Maria found me gazing out the window, not looking for flying saucers, but looking out with the same dejected, mopey expression that I'd worn most of the summer. And she asked me what was wrong. I said, "Who am I kidding? I'm not a writer. I'm just a coddled suburban kid who spent his whole life on his parents' nickel. I have an expensive college degree and no usable skills to show for it. I'm headed for San Francisco where the beats are all gone, the summer of love has faded, and the hippies are in full retreat. What am I thinking? This can't end well. I'm going to wind up in poverty or in graduate school, or both." And Maria looked at me with deep compassion in her kohl-rimmed eyes and also faint irony. And she said, "You know what your real problem is? You're middle class. But it's okay. You can get over it." And my heart leaped at her words. I felt she was right. I could, and I did, and I still haven't. But even so, her words at that moment were like chicken soup for my suburban soul. And the green tortoise bus crested a great brown California hill and started down into the bejeweled bowl of San Francisco Bay. And my life began again.